Today we have a viewer recommended story and Art Monzo delivers for us once again. Thank you for the recommendation, my man. What happens when a DM has toxic views and continuously discriminates against a new player at the table? Let's find out. I'm 24 years old and currently have been DMing for about 3 years. I mainly focus on D&D 5e and Pathfinder. Currently I'm DMing for a group of 3, 2 of which are older than me by at least 20 years and the other is my wife. We'll call them Joe, Jane, and wife for the purpose of this story. One day Joe came over to my house for the usual game night and suggested we play Werewolf the Apocalypse, WTA for short, instead of D&D. I informed him he'd have to GM since I don't know the system mechanics at all, to which he happily agreed with. So I built my character and we went off and played an amazing game that made me really love WTA. Seeing this, Joe invited me to play at his friend's house for a new werewolf game they're gonna run, and of course I agreed since I had so much fun playing it. Fast forward about 2 weeks and Joe calls me saying the game will be held that upcoming Thursday. He said to meet at his place so that we could carpool to his buddy's place since he lives about an hour away. Fast forward again to Thursday where we meet up and head over to his friend's house. We'll call him Ben. I had met Ben before, but only briefly during a big dinner my wife and I were invited to a few months back. Ben, who is just a bit older than Joe, invited me in no problem and showed me around, letting me see all his swords and movie props he had collected over the years. So far, it was totally awesome and wonderful. Now a bit of small history. I was in the army for 3 years before getting out on a medical discharge, and Ben was in the army as well for a lot longer, but years and years ago, back before I was even in elementary school. So we had a sort of military bond with each other and swapped a few stories. Well, time came for character creation, so of course I eagerly got my pencil and paper ready. To my surprise, Ben did character creation a lot differently than how Joe did when he GM'd, so of course I was lost all the same. I thought to myself, no matter, and just listened. He wanted all of his players to play Silver Fangs, which was fine by me, and then proceeded to completely negate the rules as written for character creation and was telling me to put points in things my character didn't even have, and then told me to take them away, then told me to put the points into something else, and then told me I was doing everything wrong. This is where things started to take a turn. Ben started going on and on about how my generation is full of pussies and entitled little shits. His words exactly, and I quote, "You'll never be grateful for the things you have. Your generation is so spoiled and whiny, and you never listen. All you do is cry." I just bit my tongue and didn't say anything because I knew what he was saying didn't apply to me since my parents were old enough to be his parents. Literally, they're both baby boomers, and they raised me to be a hardworking, strong-willed person who didn't want or accept handouts from anyone. When I was younger, I had to work as soon as I could just to help pay bills so we could eat since my mom lost her job due to an injury and my dad's pay was cut in half after his job was bought out. So I just ignored it for the time being and let him rant. Back to character creation, of course, I was lost and confused, so obviously I had a lot of questions to which Ben was of no help answering. Joe was kind enough to step up and help me instead. Ben, now at this point is pissed off at me and my generation, decided this would be a great time to go on another rant. This time, attacking me personally. "This game has a lot of role play and not much action in it.
I know you aren't used to it, since all you do is play that pussy-ass 5th edition. But you're playing with adults now, and we like a good story. I know that may be hard for you to understand, since your generation doesn't like to think, but try to keep up.
To which I responded with, yeah, that's the way I like to play. Sure, I mainly play 5e and Pathfinder, but I have played Cyberpunk 2020, Call of Cthulhu, Starfinder, and Vampire of the Masquerade before. And all of those have a lot of roleplay in them depending on who's running the game. I much prefer lots of roleplay over constant action. Ben, of course, proceeded to ignore me and act like I was a child who didn't know what I was talking about. I feel for OP here. It's part of the DM's duties to ensure new players feel accepted and welcomed at the table. This DM swung hard in the opposite direction, discriminating against OP based on an ignorant and uneducated outlook, plugging him into a stereotype based on his date of birth, something OP had no control over. This obviously and understandably bothered him to the point that he felt it necessary to justify to us, the audience, why he didn't belong in the pigeonhole DM put him in by bringing up his parents in childhood. When you respond like that, you give validity to the uneducated and ignorant outlook. No one should ever feel the need to explain why they aren't a stereotype. Anyone that judges you based on stereotypes rather than getting to know you as an individual doesn't deserve any type of explanation as to why you aren't what they say you are. And I'm not saying don't stick up for yourself, I'm just saying don't give validity to uneducated and ignorant outlooks by trying to explain why you aren't a part of that stereotype. And I know this kind of steps outside of my typical D&D advice, but I've been discriminated against and stereotyped in the past, so this one kind of hit a little close to home for me, even though as far as discrimination goes, this is probably on the lighter side of the spectrum, but it doesn't make it not shitty. Sorry to get so real for a second. Why so serious? Right, guys? You know, like Joker. See what I did there? All right, let's get back to the story. Fast forward and character creation is done, and we all gather our things with a last minute change of plans and head over to another one of their friends' houses to play. We all get there and I instantly make friends with everyone there. We quickly bonded because everyone was super intrigued by the fact that I 3D print and paint miniatures. A little while goes by and the game finally starts, and Ben takes his seat at the head of the table as GM. Everyone, there's 7 of us playing at this point, all of which are Joe or Ben's age, is being loud and talking over each other as Ben is trying to start off the game. I'm trying to listen, but with all the table talk, I could barely hear anything that was said. And it's honestly not really a big deal, it's just something that needs to be mentioned for what's coming next. To kick it off, everyone goes around the room saying their character's age, and when it comes to me, I say Bjorn is 25 years old.
Whoa. I said between 18 and 21. This right here. This is what I mean. Your generation doesn't listen to shit.
Okay, so he's 20. I couldn't hear you over everyone else being so loud.
Everyone else heard me just fine, but of course, you, the youngest of us, can't.
My age doesn't matter. I'm sorry, my time being in a tank in the army has left me with some hearing issues, but go on. Let's start. Ben rolled his eyes and we began. The entire game, Ben basically ignored me and my character, and whenever it did come to me, I'd suggest something that us, the party, can do, and Ben would scoff a little and move on to the next person. The majority of the time, they would agree with me and suggest the same thing, and Ben would say good job to them. All in all, I was singled out by an angry late 40s dude who didn't like my generation and took his anger out on me just for being born when I was, instead of welcoming me into the group. After Joe and I left, I explained to him that I won't be coming back to the table and that Ben needed to get his head out of his ass and not be a dick just because of someone's age, especially without knowing anything about them. Joe then proceeded to defend Ben and say, yeah, that's just how he is though, and we've all just come to accept him for it. Ben's a dick, but he's a good guy. To which I responded with, to you maybe, but either way, I'm not playing at his table anymore. Joe just said, okay, and we drove to his house, and then I left to my house in my car. After I got home, almost 2 a.m. at this point, I explained it all to my wife, and even she was shocked at the way I was treated. And to it all, my gaming group still continues to this day with my wife, Joe, and Jane, and it's still great as is. Taking on the role of DM comes with a lot of responsibility and duties. Duh. That's probably the most obvious thing I think I've ever said. But one of those duties is to facilitate a table of trust and understanding, especially to new players that join an existing table. This was the opposite of that. Anyone that displays that level of hatred as a first impression has issues that run much deeper than what we heard today. Typically, I try to give solutions to issues at the table, but this is one of those rare times that my advice is to bounce. You aren't gonna change this person's mind at the table. If you want to have a discourse with someone that has an uneducated outlook, that's great and commendable, but views that are born from ignorance and conveyed with conviction are extremely difficult to change. And it's definitely not going to happen over the course of a session or several. So I say bounce, and that's exactly what OP did. Shout out to OP, by the way, for remaining calm and handling this douchebag with class and maturity. So tip of the hat, my man. And another thank you and shout out to my man Art Monzo over in the Big Jesse Discord for recommending this one. I also want to apologize for not uploading in a while. I'm looking forward to creating these videos and pumping out some new content. Please like, share, and subscribe. The next one is about a DM that surprises new players with the worst homebrews I've ever heard of that cripple their characters. They include, but aren't limited to, a rule that because dwarves are small, they cannot look up. It gets worse. It gets worse. Thank you so much for watching, and check out this video or this one over here. They're both good. Pick one, damn it. Later.